What if the truest kind of forgiveness isn't found in apologies, but in a desert bloom you've never seen, in a voice you've long silenced, in a family trip no one asked for but desperately needed? What if the greatest revenge isn't in confrontation, but in becoming someone whole, even when no one clapped for you? Could you carry love into the fire and come out singing? Would you even dare? My name is Selena Morales. I'm 30 years old, a poet, an editor, and the oldest daughter of a family that doesn't quite know how to talk without raising its voice. Or looking away. Brooklyn is home, but not always a safe one. The brownstone I rent holds poems taped to the fridge, rejection letters folded into prayers, and a soft echo of salsa music my mother once played when she was happy. That was years ago. I start the vlog recording from my couch, hair pulled back, no makeup, just me. If you could rewrite your family story, I ask the camera gently, where would you begin? It's not just a question for an audience. It's a dare I'm throwing back at myself. My mother, Camila, is 58. A Puerto Rican woman made of iron and incense. She raised us in a hurricane of strength, never letting herself rest, never letting herself need. My sister, Talia, is 25. A hip-hop artist with a magnetic stage presence and a disappearing act for a life. She dances with words, dodges responsibility, and somehow still lands on her feet. We've been out of rhythm for years, like a melody stretched too far from the beat. And I've always been the one trying to count time, to keep the measure, to hold everyone together like a chorus line made of frayed thread. Last year, I paid off Talia's credit card debt. Mama called it what a big sister should do. No thank you, no pause. But recently, life cracked open in a different way. I got promoted. Not just a little raise, but a title that means I'm finally allowed to speak in rooms where no one used to see me. A bold, foolish, maybe saving idea. A trip. A return to something we never actually had. I booked us a cabin in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Far from concrete, far from Wi-Fi, far from all the versions of ourselves that learned how to pretend. Mama has always said she wanted to see the desert bloom. But there was never time. Always a bill, a shift, a chore, a reason to stay small. I want to give her that bloom. Not as a gift, but as a reminder she still deserves wonder. And maybe, I want to see if Talia remembers what it's like to sit at the table without performing. So I planned it. A few days, just us. No roles, no guilt. Just real time, real silence, real breath. A chance, if not to start over, then at least to pause the mess and say I see you. Not for what you should have been, but for what you are. I end the vlog with a look straight into the lens. I'm going to try. Because if I don't, I'll keep writing poems about things that never happened. And I want a family tale that lives outside my notebooks. Sometimes I wonder, when do we stop waiting for people to become who we need, and start becoming someone we don't have to hide from? Because in every family tale, buried deep, there's always a hidden revenge. Not shouted, not violent, but the soft cruelty of never being seen for your softness. I don't want to carry that anymore. This won't be a revenge story. This won't be about cheating stories or betrayals told over wine and tears. This will be about what's left when the fire burns everything else down. I'm taking them to the desert. I don't know what will bloom. But I'm done pretending that silence is love. Let's see where this goes. You can pack sage, soft blankets, and vegan snacks. You can plan rituals beneath starlight and hope they'll matter. But how do you prepare your heart for a trip your people never asked to take? When love feels like a performance and history echoes too loudly in silence, how do you make space for something new? What if healing requires the kind of hope no one applauds? The cabin I chose sits deep in the high desert, far enough that the silence becomes a fourth guest. No cell service, no Starbucks, just one wooden house, 3 bedrooms, and whatever ghosts we decide to carry in. I planned everything. Morning meditations, a watercolor hour for cactus and sky, and a campfire night where we'd share stories. Our own, not the ones we pretend to tell at holidays. I wrote the schedule down, color-coded it, attached the PDF to an email titled, "Let's make this time count." Talia replied 3 hours later, "Did you write a syllabus?" 3 words. Dripping sarcasm. She might as well have added a laugh track. Camila didn't email. She called. "Are we doing rituals now?" She said, her tone somewhere between joking and judging. "Should I bring candles too?" I laughed softly. "Only if you want to." But already that ache, sharp, familiar, pressed against my ribs. That knowing, no one else believes in what I'm trying to build. Still, I overpacked. Extra throw blankets, organic teas, journals wrapped in twine, a playlist filled with Nina Simone and silence. I bought lavender oil, incense, oat milk, as if softness could make them stay. as if kindness could be preloaded in the fridge. Then Talia texted again, "Can I bring my new boyfriend? He's chill." I didn't answer. My fingers hovered over the screen, then put the phone face down. I already felt like an outsider in a trip I created. Camila sent a photo of her suitcase. The caption read, "Bringing old clothes. Just in case no one notices if I leave them behind." I stared at that message longer than I should have. What do you do when your mother's humor feels like a quiet refusal to receive joy? That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my journal. They think this is a getaway. I'm trying to write a new family tale with no villains, no saints. Just women who survived more than they've ever named. And still, I'm scared. Because even the best of intentions can turn sour. Because the road to healing is paved with the sharp edges of betrayal stories. The ones no one wants to retell, but everyone carries like secret luggage. And isn't that how most infidelity stories begin too? Not with a kiss, but with a silence. With someone feeling unseen, unheard, unloved, and reaching elsewhere for reflection. The night before the flight, I lit a candle. No rituals. No drama. Just me, the poem I'd been working on. I am not here to save this family. I am here to bring them back to the table. Whether they eat or not, is no longer mine to carry. I whispered it into the night, then exhaled. What if no one shows up fully? What if love, real, unarmed, unasked for, isn't enough? And quietly, I ask you, dear listener, have you ever tried to build a bridge when everyone else only brought matches? Tomorrow we fly. I don't know what awaits in the desert. But I know I'm done living inside other people's refusal to try. Some arrivals feel less like beginnings and more like soft collisions. With silence, with expectation, with the version of yourself you prayed would be enough. And when the air changes, when the sky opens, you wonder, did I bring us here to heal? Or just to watch it all fall apart far from home? The desert doesn't lie. It only reflects what you refuse to say. We landed in Albuquerque under a blue so wide it made the soul flinch. The kind of sky that humbles you. Makes your plans feel too small. I breathed it in anyway. This was supposed to be the turning point. But standing outside the rental counter, watching the sun paint the concrete gold, I felt something else. Extravagant and empty. Like someone had handed me a gift I didn't know how to open. I picked the SUV carefully. Safe, roomy, reliable. Talia wrinkled her nose. "This car has no artist vibe," she said, sliding into the back seat like she was being punished. I didn't argue. I just drove. The road into the high desert was long, soft with dust, and quiet. Until it wasn't. The cabin was even more beautiful than the photos. Rustic, sacred. Sacred in the way a place is when you know no one has spoken hurt there yet. I gave Mama the master bedroom. No questions. No martyrdom. Just grace. I took the smallest room for myself. The twin bed, the squeaky floorboard. Talia, of course, refused the pull-out sofa. I don't sleep near windows. What if something watches me? We switched. Dinner that night was at a local Mexican spot, spiced and rich and real. Talia poked at her mold chicken like it had insulted her. "Can we just get Taco Bell?" I looked at her. Really looked. But Mama only smiled, indulgent, proud. Didn't say a word to correct her. That silence. That's the kind that stays with you longer than words ever could. Because I wasn't looking for thanks. But I had hoped, just once, to not feel like the ghost in the middle of the table. That night, I stepped outside alone. The stars above the desert are a poem in themselves, sharp and clear, unashamed to shine even when no one claps. I whispered the poem I had carried for weeks, the one I wasn't brave enough to share in daylight. I am the one who carried fire, who kept the light even when no one asked, who learned how to burn without burning out. I sat on a boulder and pressed my hand to the coolness of stone. And there, with only the night to witness, I scratched a sentence into the rock's skin. I don't need to be understood. I need to be seen. A question fluttered through my ribs. Quiet but insistent. Have you ever loved someone so much, you forgot to ask if they were even listening? In the distance, an owl called out. Low. Ancient. The kind of sound that doesn't interrupt, just reminds. I smiled. At least the wild things hear me. At least the wind doesn't ask me to smile more, explain less. People think a true infidelity story is about romance. About bodies crossed in betrayal. But I've learned the deepest kind of cheating is when you abandon yourself, just to keep the peace. And maybe the cruelest of cheating wife stories isn't about passion. It's about performance. About the woman who lies with a smile, sets the table, and still goes to bed alone in her soul. And maybe this little trip, this desert, this silence, is where I stop lying to myself too. It's never the explosion that breaks a family. It's the thousand soft sighs, the fork not lifted, the eye not met. A broken dish is easier to name than a broken trust, And sometimes the loudest heartbreak is a quiet breakfast where no one shows up but you. Tell me, when did the ache of not being needed begin to feel heavier than the labor of being ignored? The first morning in the desert was supposed to begin in silence, intentional, sacred. A seated meditation beneath the slanting light, our legs crossed, eyes closed, breath shared. Instead, it began with the echo of electronic laughter. Talia, still in pajamas, playing some game on her phone, curled next to her boyfriend, the glow of their screen louder than words. She'd stayed up until 3, I later found out, screaming into her headset like joy was a performance she owed the internet. I waited. 5 minutes past the start. Then 10. Then 20. Camila walked by, saw me sitting alone on the floor. She sipped coffee like it held secrets and said, "Let her be. Young people need to live." I didn't argue, but her words cut sharper than I expected. Because what she really meant was, don't ask for too much. And what I heard was, you're asking to be disappointed, again. Breakfast was cold oatmeal and colder silence. I chewed slowly as if the act itself could distract me from the lump in my throat. I had planned a simple bonding moment later, painting desert flowers together. Cactus blossoms, vibrant and stubborn. I laid out brushes, palettes, blank canvases like offerings. Mama said she'd join, but only I showed up, so I painted alone. A bloom in full color with no one to admire it. Later, laughter burst from the other room. Talia was filming a TikTok. Some dance. Music blaring like a dare. The floor shook with her stomping rhythm. She knocked over the vase Mama had picked out at the local shop the night before. Ceramic cracked, water pooled. I said too softly at first, "Can you turn it down?" She rolled her eyes. "It's for a real. Chill. Can you stop acting like nothing you do affects anyone?" I didn't raise my voice, but the question left a bruise in the air. She paused. Looked at me with that sharpness only siblings can wield. "You always act like your poems make you a better person. You pretend to be kind but it's all fake, Selena. It's all an act." My breath caught in my chest. Camila didn't intervene, she just left the room. No comfort, no correction, no bridge. Her retreat said more than Talia's insult ever could. And I felt it, deep and bitter. That special H that family drama stories carve into a heart. That night, I wandered into the woods behind the cabin, phone in hand. I recorded a single line, my voice barely above the wind. I am the crack, not the wall. I am where the light leaks through. Sometimes, I wonder, how many women have been asked to stay silent to keep a family stitched together with shame? And is that human revenge? The kind where you survive anyway, even when no one claps for your effort. In the quiet after, I returned to the cabin. Sat by the fire pit alone. And I thought, Mama's silence has always been the deepest kind of betrayal. Louder than any infidelity story, colder than any family revenge story ever told. Because when someone you love refuses to witness you, that's a forgetting that feels permanent. There's a moment, right before you walk away, when your silence becomes louder than the noise you've been swallowing. When the air shifts and your chest opens not for love, but for clarity. And maybe the real burning revenge isn't in hurting them back, but in finally choosing yourself, even if it means leaving behind the people you once thought you were born to save. The ceremony was simple in my mind. We'd each write down something old. Grudges, guilt, worn-out roles. Fold the paper. Burn it together under the moon. Let smoke carry what we never dared say. I told them a day in advance. Gave them options. Just 10 minutes, I said. No pressure. Talia rolled her eyes. You planning group therapy now? Mama didn't even look up from her book. Dinner that night felt like it was waiting to fall apart. No one passed it back. Talia clinked her spoon against her glass like it was a mic. So, tonight's the healing bonfire, right? Should I bring incense? Or maybe a dream catcher? Something inside me cracked. The spoon in my hand hit the table harder than I intended, silver on wood, sharp and final. At least I'm trying, I said. At least I made something. Something that isn't sarcasm or silence. Camila set her fork down, calm as ever. You're too sensitive. Not everything has to be a poem, Selena. Not everyone wants to live in your metaphors. That was it. The match struck. I stood up. No announcement, no scene. Just grabbed my coat, my keys, and walked out into the night. The desert held me like only land that's never betrayed you can. I walked toward the main road. The only gas station for miles still had its lights on. I stood there, under that buzzing fluorescent glow, and ordered a taxi with shaky fingers. My phone vibrated. Talia had texted, "Come back. At least so Mom doesn't have to be embarrassed in front of the cousins." It wasn't about me. It never was. Back at the cabin, I moved like a ghost. Opened my laptop, booked a flight home for the next morning. Printed the ticket. Taped it to the fridge. Scrawled a note beneath I tried. In the bathroom mirror, I fogged the glass with breath, then wrote in the steam, maybe I'm not a bad daughter, just a tired one. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I think grief dries up when you've been sipping it for years. Camila walked by the doorway. Didn't stop. Just said, you always did love the drama? Not, are you okay? Not, please stay. Just a sigh. Like I'd asked her for too much air. I packed quietly. No tears. My body moved like it remembered leaving before love could rot. And maybe that's the thing about family betrayal. It's not loud. It's not even cruel. It's just consistent. Like a faucet that drips until it drowns everything you once thought was home. At dawn, I wheeled my suitcase to the edge of the driveway. The sky was blush and soft and didn't care that I was leaving. A question pulsed in my chest, aching and soft. At what point does staying become the real betrayal? Some family tales don't end in reunion. Some end in retreat. In escape. In remembering that choosing peace isn't a failure, it's a survival. And maybe this was never about being understood. Maybe the real revenge was choosing not to burn for people who never brought water. Sometimes the loneliest part of leaving isn't the empty seat beside you. It's the silence in your chest when no one calls you back. But there's a certain strength in that stillness, a strange kind of home in your own breath. And maybe the greatest kind of healing is born in airports and cab rides, in moments where you remember. Your story doesn't need an audience to matter. Selena sat at gate B7 in the Albuquerque airport, hands resting still on her thighs. No earbuds, no scrolling, no soundtrack to soften the ache, just her, and the buzz of departure. She didn't cry, not because the pain was gone, but because it had settled, like sediment in a jar, heavy, quiet, unmoving. In the hollow of her palm, she wrote a line with her fingertip, invisible to everyone but herself. If they can't see me, I can still see myself. She closed her eyes. Let it be true, even if just for now. The plane ride was uneventful, except for the weight she carried. Less like luggage, more like memory. She turned her face to the window, away from passengers and pity. Her eyes brimmed but never spilled. A flight attendant passed without pause, then circled back. She didn't speak, just slid a small pack of tissues into the seat, back pocket. Selena whispered, "Thank you." Too low to be heard, but maybe not too late to be felt. Brooklyn welcomed her with a rain-slicked sky. A taxi that smelled faintly of old cologne and yesterday's takeout. She leaned her forehead against the window, letting the rhythm of the city lull her. No music. No need. When she reached her brownstone, she didn't turn the lights on. Just kicked off her shoes, sat on the living room floor, and exhaled the kind of breath that's been holding too much for too long. Her eyes landed on the folder labeled, "Trip Itinerary." She opened it. Each line she'd planned. Family dinner time to reconnect. Painting together bloom within. Felt like paper cuts now. Words meant to mend that only reminded her how little anyone wanted to be sewn together. She reached for her printer and pulled out photos she hadn't shown anyone. Talia laughing in the sun, Camila squinting at the desert flowers, Selena, blurry in the background, always out of focus. She taped them to the wall, neat and quiet. Underneath, she scribbled a note. The phone rang. Reina. Her anchor. Her firebrand. A poet whose truth cut clean. Selena answered with a sigh. They didn't want to hear me, she said. Reina didn't rush to comfort. She never did. Instead, she waited. Then spoke. Then write it for yourself. Let the world hear you now. That sentence struck something tender, because for all the family tales Selena had tried to salvage, maybe this one, the one with the silences, the wounds, the unanswered texts, was the most honest. And isn't that the cruel beauty of cheating stories and revenge stories? Not the act itself, but the forgetting that follows. The rewriting of who was ever truly present. Selena stood up, walked to her desk, opened a fresh notebook. This one wouldn't be for her mother, or her sister, or to mend anything. This one would be for her. No metaphors, no forgiveness, no performing. Just truth, raw, rusted, and hers. Because maybe the real hidden revenge is not in leaving, but in returning to yourself, more whole than when you left. Some words are too heavy to send, too sacred to be spoken aloud. So you write them down not for them, but for yourself. Because there's a moment in every woman's healing when she stops waiting for apologies and starts naming her truth, line by line. And maybe that's how it begins. Not with confrontation, but with a blank page that finally listens without judging. Selena didn't block them. She didn't argue, or rage, or send a late-night voice memo laced with trembling breath. Instead, she sat with her pen and opened a new document titled Poems I'll Never Mail. Each entry was addressed like a letter. One for Camila. One for Talia. One for the girl she used to be. She didn't write with forgiveness in mind. She wrote like she was whispering to the wind, hoping maybe, if the breeze carried her words far enough, they'd land somewhere safe, somewhere sacred. Each line carved a truth she hadn't been allowed to say out loud. Each stanza made her feel a little more real. Camila emailed 3 days later. The subject line read, "Enough. The body. You embarrassed me. I didn't raise you to act like that. You've made this family look weak." No apology. No warmth. Only judgment dressed up as discipline. Selena didn't reply. She read the message twice, then turned back to her poem, in progress. The daughter is not the mirror. She does not exist to reflect your pride or your shame. She is her own weight, even when you squint to look away. Then Talia went public. Posted a TikTok, a silly, flippant voiceover. That moment when your big sister plans a whole healing trip then bails because her sage didn't light right. The comments laughed. Selena didn't. But she didn't rage either. She simply sat with the ache and wrote. When you're the only sober one at the family table, they call you boring, not brave. Reina reached out again, inviting her to read at an open mic. Selena said no. But one rainy Thursday night she slipped into the back row. Hoodie up, journal in hand. She watched as strangers stood and named their grief like gospel. Then someone took the mic and read a poem about a mother walking out of a daughter's life, without a suitcase, only silence. Selena's body shuddered. Tears slid slow and unnoticed. No one knew who she was. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. When she got home, she didn't light a candle or stage a ritual. She opened her voice memos and whispered her latest piece into the mic. She didn't publish it. Didn't share it. Her voice, strong, cracking, holy. And when she finished, she wrapped her arms around her own body. Not as apology. Not as performance. As recognition. I am not a burden, she whispered. I am a survivor. And isn't that what so many betrayal stories forget? That the wound doesn't always bleed outward. That sometimes, the truest infidelity stories are about families cheating each other of tenderness, again and again. Until one of them finally dares to stop playing the game. A question stirred in her chest like a quiet tide. Have you ever forgiven someone who never asked, just so you could breathe again? The wind outside rustled like applause. And for the first time in too long, Selena didn't feel like a ghost in her own home. She felt, herself. Not all apologies come with flowers. Some arrive quietly, in a text that stutters toward healing. In a song that dares to name what's been left unsaid. Forgiveness, when it finally begins, doesn't always knock on the front door. It slips in through the cracks you swore you'd sealed shut. And sometimes, the first act of love is simply not looking away when someone reaches back. The message came just after midnight. From Talia. I want to say sorry, I just don't know where to start. Selena read the text once. Then again, she didn't reply. She reached for her journal instead and wrote, not knowing where to start is already a beginning. She let the words settle, not like a victory, but like rain on soil that hasn't felt softness in a while. 2 days later, Camila's handwriting arrived in a white envelope, no return address. If I was wrong, you can say it. But don't go quiet again. That was it. Not an apology. But not the silence she'd grown up with, either. Selena turned the letter over in her hands, held it like a glass that might shatter. She didn't write back. Not yet. But in her next untitled poem, she wrote, the day you spoke, even if clumsily, was the day I stopped thinking of you as stone. The shift was small, but she felt it. Like a door creaking open in a long-locked house. A week passed. Then an audio file hit her inbox. The Sister Who Left, a song demo from Talia. Sparse chords, raw vocals, a trembling honesty in her voice Selena hadn't heard since they were kids harmonizing in the bathroom mirror. She listened to it once. Then again. Then one more time, lying on her floor, eyes closed, letting the weight of memory lift just slightly. The anger didn't disappear. But it loosened. Like wind through an open window. Reina called the next morning. I've got a wild idea, she said. What if you taught a poetry class? Online? For Latin women. A space for voices like yours. Selena hesitated. I'm not ready to be anyone's guide. You don't have to be, Reina said. Just be honest. That's more than enough? So she tried? 10 women joined the first session. By week 2, there were 50. By the end of the month, over 300 names filled her inbox. Each woman came with her own storm. Single mothers, daughters of silence, wives tired of being invisible. Some poems read like a true infidelity story, not between partners, but between a woman and the version of herself she had to cheat on just to survive. Selena listened to every stanza like it was gospel. She didn't fix anyone, she just made space. At the end of each session, she spoke the same line, soft but steady. You don't need to be fully understood. You just need to not abandon yourself. One evening, as she cleaned out her inbox, a message from a stranger caught her breath. Your poem saved my life. I was going to do something irreversible, but then I heard you say, you are not a burden, you are a survivor. And I paused. I stayed. Thank you. Selena stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Because for every cheating wife story that painted women as villains, there were hundreds of stories cheating them of softness, of grace, of being allowed to fall apart and still be loved. She turned off the screen, pressed her palms together, and whispered, "Thank you for staying." And quietly, a question fluttered in her chest. What if healing doesn't mean we become whole? Only that we become real, finally. Coming back doesn't mean forgetting the fire. It means learning to walk across ash without expecting to be burned again. Sometimes returning isn't about forgiveness or finality, but about choosing presence over pain. And when you've carried a family in silence for too long, there's a strange freedom in putting the weight down and realizing they're finally walking toward you, not behind. The invitation came printed on soft cream paper, tucked inside a red envelope. Dear Selena Morales, we invite you to headline the Word Made Flesh spoken word celebration in Chicago. Your voice matters. Please let it rise. She reread the words 3 times, not because she doubted them, but because something inside her finally believed them. Camila's text came not long after. Just that. No backhanded praise, no conditions. Selena sat on her windowsill and let the tears come without apology. Then Talia posted a story, a screenshot of the event flyer, captioned, "My sister's about to blow the roof off. Proud of her always." The words weren't poetic, but they were whole. For the first time in a long time, Selena smiled without feeling like she needed to earn it. The smile sat light on her face, like it belonged there. She opened her inbox, hovered over the family thread she hadn't used in months, and typed, "I'll be back in NYC this Friday. If anyone wants to meet for coffee, I'll be at our old spot on 6 by noon." She didn't expect a reply. But they came. No flowers, no grand speeches, just the scrape of chairs, the clink of coffee mugs, and 2 women sitting beside her like they never left. Camila asked, "How have you been?" Talia added, "Really though. How's your heart?" That was all, and somehow, it was everything. Selena leaned back, looked at them both. No filters. No waiting for someone to say sorry just right. She said, "We've all written chapters that didn't make sense, but any of us can keep writing." She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 freshly printed copies of her newest chapbook. The title, "The Desert Didn't Kill Me, It Taught Me How to Endure." Camila held it carefully, as if it were something breakable and sacred. Talia flipped to the dedication page and read aloud, "D. For the ones I left behind, and the ones who found their way back." And for the first time, when they hugged, it wasn't for a photo, or an apology, or some stitched-up version of togetherness. It was real. No family therapist present, no family holiday looming, just warmth, need, and mutual breath. Because the best kind of human revenge is not spite. It's softness that survives. And maybe not every infidelity story is about lovers or vows. Maybe it's about the ways we betray ourselves just to keep peace in a house that never heard us scream. So when you finally return and choose not to repeat the cycle, that's when the real family drama stories end. And something better, something quieter, begins. A question lingered like a hush in her chest. How do you know you've truly come home, if not by the way your shoulders finally rest? They walked out of the cafe side by side, not holding hands, but holding space. And this time, no one looked back. Some healing doesn't come with music or applause. It arrives quietly, through open doors and small, wordless acts of care. When survival becomes art and pain turns into poems, you stop asking who hurt you and start asking what beauty can be born from the burn. Because sometimes the best burning revenge is when you rise. Not to be seen, but to finally see yourself. The room smelled like lavender oil and freshly sharpened pencils. The folding chairs were mismatched. The sign taped to the door read, "Poetry and Emotional Recovery for Survivors All Welcome." Selena took a breath before stepping in. This was hers. Not a performance, not a retreat, just a space she'd carved from the wreckage, tender, unpolished, real. By 6:05, 8 women had arrived. By 6:15 the back row filled up. And just as Selena began to speak, she saw her, Talia, standing in the farthest corner, hoodie pulled up, eyes lowered. She didn't speak, didn't hug, didn't perform. She just listened. That alone was enough. By the second session, another woman brought pan dulce. One evening, Selena found a small tin on the welcome table. Flan. Homemade. Her favorite. No note. But the handwriting on the label was Camila's. No grand gestures. Just presence. Later that night, Raina said, "You always thought you had to hold the whole family on your back. But girl, you weren't carrying them. You were cultivating them. You didn't keep the house together. You helped it bloom again." Selena didn't argue. Because for the first time, she didn't feel responsible, she felt free. A few weeks later her memoir launched. Top Memoir of the Year. Latin Lit Weekly announced. A voice that bleeds and builds in equal measure. At the launch party, people stood in line with books open and pens ready. But when Selena spotted her mother, it wasn't the camera that caught her breath. It was the way Camila held the book. Not like a prop, but like scripture. She watched her mother turn the pages slowly, lips moving as she read. And when it was her turn, Camila said nothing, just looked her daughter in the eyes and nodded. That nod meant more than 1,000 sorries. Talia took the stage next. Her song filled the room. A stripped-down melody. Honest, unarmored, full. When the final note faded, the audience erupted. Selena didn't cry this time. She smiled and walked up to the mic. "I didn't write this book hoping anyone would change," she said. "I wrote it so I wouldn't break." She paused. Let the silence hold. Then, her voice softened into a final poem. She no longer carries fire, she sings it and it warms the whole house. There was no standing ovation, no streamers, no one threw roses, but when Selena stepped off stage, she felt something even rarer. Peace. The kind that doesn't ask for witnesses. The kind that doesn't depend on approval. And quietly, she wondered, how much love have we missed by waiting for it to arrive in the form we expected? Because sometimes, the greatest revenge against family betrayal is not vengeance, but a steady life, a real one, a beautiful one. Not all family tales need to be rewritten, some just need to be reclaimed. Sometimes an apology doesn't arrive with flowers or fanfare. It sits across from you at dinner, with shaky hands and a notebook full of quiet regrets. Real healing doesn't always shout. It pulls up a chair, pours you a cup of water, and says, "I saw you. I just didn't know how to say it." And maybe that's where some family tales begin again. Not with answers, but with honesty. It was a Sunday late afternoon, the kind of quiet only Brooklyn knows before dusk. Selena wasn't expecting the call. But Camilla's voice was steady. "Dinner. Just us. I'll cook." She said yes before she had time to overthink. Camila opened the door in her apron, not her armor. The house smelled of sofrito and warmth, the kind of scent that remembers you even when people forget. At the dinner table, between two folded napkins, sat a small, spiral notebook. Worn, bent at the corners. Loved. Camila pushed it across the table. Didn't say much, just opened it. Inside a list. Line after line, date after date. Selena picked up Talia from school while I worked late. Selena paid for the phone bill when I was too proud to ask. Selena cooked when I had nothing left in me but silence. Selena tried. Selena tried. Selena tried. Camila looked at her and said, "It's not that I didn't see. I just didn't know how to say thank you without feeling small." Selena didn't cry. She felt the windows of her chest open like spring, felt air in places that had been tight for years. There it was, not a full apology, but the first sentence in a language they were just now learning. Later, Talia arrived. Late, of course, jacket half-zipped, hair windblown. She held a small envelope and slid it across the table. "It's not everything. But I want to start paying you back. For that spa thing, back then." Selena didn't open it right away. It wasn't about the money, it was about the effort. She smiled. "Thank you." They ate slow. Talk not to rehash, but to remember. The kind of remembering that doesn't ache. It illuminates. At one point, Talia laughed and said, "You know, I always felt like a side character in your story." Selena turned to her, serious but soft. "You were never a side character. You just never realized how much light you carried." Camila wiped her mouth and said, almost shyly, "If you want, I'd be open to. I mean, we could try therapy, family therapy, together." No one answered right away. But the silence didn't sting, it waited, it invited. And in that moment, Selena realized something she'd been too tired to see before. This wasn't a scene in one of those revenge stories where the mother begs, the daughter storms out, the sister disappears again. This was a quiet rewriting. An erasure of hidden revenge through truth spoken out loud. Because not all cheating stories are romantic. Sometimes it's the betrayal of not being believed, not being thanked, not being loved in the way you needed. But here they were. Writing a different ending, not perfect, but present. And Selena found herself wondering, how many relationships have we given up on? Not because they couldn't change, but because we stopped believing they could try. She folded her napkin slowly, hands steady now. Not because the pain was gone, but because the weight had shifted. Tonight, they weren't a broken family. They were a family trying again. And sometimes that's the bravest line in the story. Some rooms feel heavier than they look. 4 chairs, a box of tissues, a clock ticking too loudly. But inside them, truths are peeled back like skin, and silence no longer gets to be in charge. Family therapy isn't the fix, it's the mirror. And sometimes, healing begins with the quiet courage to say, this is the role I've played. This is the role I'm ready to outgrow. The first therapy session wasn't warm. It was clinical, too bright. The chairs too close, the air too still. But they all showed up. That in itself was a small miracle. Selena sat with her palms open on her lap. Talia crossed her arms, jaw tight. Camila looked everywhere but at either of them. The therapist smiled gently. We'll begin simply, she said. What role do you believe you've carried in your family? No one spoke right away. Then Selena inhaled, slow and full. I was the one who did everything, she said. The peacemaker. The planner, the fixer. I did it all so I could feel worthy. Accepted. The therapist nodded. Wrote something down. Talia's voice followed, small but sharp. I was the one everyone excused. Because no one ever really expected anything from me. Selena turned her head, but didn't speak. Camila cleared her throat. Her hands twisted a tissue around her fingers. I thought if I stayed in control, if I made the rules, the house wouldn't fall apart. I didn't know how to lead without gripping too tight. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was sacred. As if the room was holding its breath for them. Then the therapist asked, if you could go back to when you were 8 years old, what do you wish your mother, your sister, or your daughter had done for you? Selena blinked slowly, but her voice came fast. I wish my mother had asked me if I was sad just once. Talia looked down, then up, then finally at Selena. I wish you had told me I was smart, not just messy, not just a problem to be handled. Camila's voice cracked for the first time. I wish I had listened sooner. I thought I was protecting you by being strong. But maybe I was just shutting you out. The therapist didn't rush to fill the space. She let it bloom and settle. She said, pain doesn't vanish just because it's named, but naming it gives us the chance to finally set it down. Together, Selena felt her shoulders drop a little, the burden loosening, not because it was gone, but because someone else had offered to carry a corner. And perhaps that's what so many betrayal stories miss, that the deepest injuries aren't always about lies or infidelity stories, but about the years you feel invisible in the same house where you eat, sleep, and ache. Some true infidelity stories are between the self you become and the self you bury to stay loved. Selena looked at her mother, at her sister, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like the one holding the whole thing up. She wondered quietly, what if the strongest thing a family can do isn't stay intact, but learn how to break and return softer? The therapist nodded again. We're not here to blame, we're here to release. No one said a word, but no one left the room either. And that somehow felt like progress. Healing doesn't always arrive in declarations or dramatic scenes. It comes in the quiet shift of habits, in the sound of a softer voice note, in letting someone else stir the soup. When a family starts again, it's not from the top, it's from the small, unseen corners. And maybe peace doesn't show up like a guest. Maybe it grows like a cactus. Quiet, patient, beautiful in the places you least expect. Selena called it dinner without judgment, a simple idea, one night a month, no interruptions, no sarcasm, just food, eye contact, and the space to say, I felt, without someone replying, well, you shouldn't have. The first time, Camila brought a rose con gandules. Talia brought cupcakes with too much frosting. Selena brought her full self, and didn't apologize for it. It was awkward. But they stayed, they passed the beans, they listened. Camila, once known for sending texts like commands, started recording voice messages instead, her tone softer, slower. Like she was still learning how to speak in lowercase. Talia took the lead on planning Camila's birthday. She chose the venue, coordinated the playlist, even called the aunt no one talks to. Selena simply said, didn't take over. Didn't fix anything. Letting go of control, she realized, isn't the same as letting go of love. A week later, a new group chat popped up on her phone, the Morales Trio V2.0. The subtitle read, Only Real Feelings. No memes. And somehow it worked. Camila would drop in with a heart emoji after therapy. Talia would send a voice note when a lyric came to her in traffic. Selena would text, I'm overwhelmed today. And no one told her to get over it. One afternoon, Selena declined a poetry festival invitation. She needed rest. For the first time in her career, she said no without guilt trailing behind her like a second skin. Camila didn't ask why. She just invited her over to cook. No agenda. Just onions to chop and music in the background. Meanwhile, Talia had been working on something new. A song called, "What If We Begin Again?" The beat pulsed like breath, imperfect, alive. Talia told her, "I wanted it to sound like starting over. Like the pause between two people finally listening." Selena wrote that night, "My family is not fixed, but I don't carry them alone anymore." They weren't cured, but they were learning how to care in real time. One day, Camila suggested they paint the balcony wall. Something bright, something alive, so they did. The three of them, side by side, brushes in hand, they painted cactus flowers, tall, wild, unapologetically vibrant, the kind of bloom that only happens after surviving drought. And as Selena stepped back to admire the mural, she whispered, "The strangest thing about peace is how quickly it can become your new normal. And maybe that's the true secret of survival. That it isn't loud. It's not even proud. It's just here, real, rooted, ongoing." And sometimes, true infidelity stories don't start in someone's bed. Sometimes they start in someone's silence. In the way a cheating wife story or stories cheating the truth of who we really are begin with pretending we don't need what we ache for. Selena no longer ached to be the savior, she just wanted to be included. And that was finally enough. A question surfaced gently, like breathe. What if the healing you need isn't in being understood, but in being allowed to exist exactly as you are? Not every trip is about escape. Sometimes, it's about returning, with fewer wounds, softer hands, and the quiet hope that love can sound different this time. Sedona wasn't a redo of what broke, it was a reimagining of what could grow, if everyone carried less armor and more honesty. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about making room for something tender to finally stay. It was Talia's idea. She texted one morning, out of nowhere. "What if we go somewhere new? Not to fix anything, just..." Selena read it twice, then again. Arizona, Sedona, red rocks, open skies, a different kind of desert, not the one that held their failures, a new landscape, waiting. This time, everyone had a job. Selena would lead morning meditation and writing, Talia in charge of playlists and meals. Camila chose the cabin, something small, near a creek, tucked into the hush of hills. No spy brochures, no curated itineraries, just a wooden deck, soft silence, and the promise of not trying too hard. On the second night, they sat in a circle, no candlelight, no ceremony, just truth. Selena called it, saying what hurts without fixing it. Talia was the first to speak. She said, "I didn't apply to that scholarship when I was 17. I thought I'd be wasting everyone's time. I never said that out loud before." Her voice broke on the word thought. Selena didn't rush in, didn't soothe, she just placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. That was enough. Then it was Selena's turn. She said, "I became so obsessed with being the kind one, the helpful one, the dependable one. Because I was terrified of becoming cold. I didn't know how to be honest and soft." Her voice didn't crack, but her chest did. Camila sat silent. "Then, I didn't know how to let go without feeling like I was disappearing. That's why I clung to control. But I see now, control isn't connection." No one replied right away. Instead, they leaned in. 3 women. 3 heartbeats. And for the first time, the silence felt like an embrace. There was no aha moment. No dramatic crescendo like in those family drama stories. But later, as Selena journaled beside the stream, she wrote, "Sedona didn't erase what happened. It gave us a path through it." Sometimes, family revenge stories don't unfold in slamming doors or decades of distance. Sometimes they take shape in quiet withholding, of affection, of apologies, of softness. And when the infidelity story isn't between lovers, but between the people we once promised to protect, it's easy to betray the very softness in ourselves just to survive. Selena didn't need anyone to be perfect. She just wanted everyone to try. They spent the last day painting smooth stones. Camila's read patience, Talia's starting over, Selena's still here. They left the rocks on the edge of the trail, not for others, for themselves. A quiet marker we passed through, we changed. And as they drove back, windows down, hair whipping in desert wind, Selena caught her reflection in the side mirror, smiling. Not because everything was solved, but because, finally, something was shared. And isn't that the real redemption in some human revenge tales? Not payback, not proving anything, just staying, softening, loving. A question lingered, almost too gentle to speak. How do you measure healing? When peace becomes the new language and no one feels the need to shout. They say from ashes, nothing grows. But I've learned that fire doesn't just destroy, it reveals. Beneath what burns there is soil richer than before. Healing doesn't shout, it whispers in poems, in pauses, in a sister's drawing or a mother's softened voice. And when the heart dares to speak through smoke, It doesn't ask to be rescued. It simply asks to be witnessed. Selena stepped onto the university campus with her notes clutched against her chest like a prayer. A guest lecturer for the semester. The course Healing Through Language. It sounded official, but for her it was personal. She opened the first class not with credentials, but with a poem she had written at Fortune. Faded pencil, folded corners, the kind of raw that only comes before shame learns to edit pain. As she read, her voice trembled. But it didn't break, and when she finished, no one clapped. They just sat, holding silence like it was something sacred. One student raised her hand. "What do you think about families hurting each other?" Selena inhaled deeply, not from surprise, but from knowing the answer had lived inside her longer than she'd known how to name it. She said, "It's not your fault if someone never learned how to love, but it is your responsibility not to make that your legacy." And the room exhaled. Later that night, in her quiet apartment, she titled her second book, The Flame Carried Me Home, not because she wanted to relive the burn, but because she finally understood what it lit in her. The courage to return, not as the version they wanted, but as the woman she had become. Talia designed the cover, three women beneath a blooming cactus. It was bold, soft, true. Camila, now practiced in grace, asked if she could write the dedication. It read, "I once called my daughter stubborn. Today I call her brave." No sweeping apologies. Just a line that said, "I see you now." Selena stood at the mic on book launch night, holding that truth in her hands. She didn't try to be poetic. She simply said, "I don't write to be forgiven. I write so what I've endured means something." And as she recited her closing poem, "If there is anything left from the ashes, may it be the root of who I am becoming," no one cheered. Not at first. They stood, one by one, not for her fame, not even for her fire, but because they saw themselves somewhere in the smoke she survived. Because sometimes, family betrayal doesn't end in a scream or a slammed door. Sometimes it ends in a whisper of, "I'm still here." And in that room, full of strangers and wounds, Selena knew her burning revenge had never been about revenge at all. It was about reclaiming her name, her story, her voice. And maybe that's what healing really looks like in these family tales. Not the absence of fire, but the decision to plant something anyway. Do you remember the first time you chose to stay soft, even after life tried to scorch it out of you? What if healing doesn't come in grand speeches or applause? What if it arrives in quiet rituals, the sound of a pen before sunrise, the breath you take before saying no, the softness of choosing your own rhythm? For those who've spent a lifetime performing worthiness, the bravest thing you can do is whisper, "I deserve peace," even if no one's clapping for it. Selena started waking up before the city stirred, not to answer emails, not to revise pages, just to sit. Just to listen, just to write. She stopped chasing momentum, stopped filling her calendar for validation. When a producer from a major talk show emailed about an inspiring Latina spotlight, she typed a polite "thank you," then pressed delete. Talia blinked at her over Sunday lunch. "You used to say yes to everything." Selena smiled gently. "Now I say yes to myself first." There was no bitterness in her tone, only clarity, like water that had been murky finally settling clear. Camila asked, "Can I share your story on Facebook? I'll let you approve the post." That in itself was a revolution. She said yes. At the Bronx Public Library, Selena began teaching poetry to teenage Latinx girls. They called her La Luz del Barrio, the light of the neighborhood. One girl, no older than 13, handed her a crumpled notebook. "You're the reason I don't feel invisible in class." Selena held it together in front of them. But on the walk home, tears slipped down her face in quiet gratitude, because she remembered being that girl, acting to be seen, desperate for someone to say, "Your words matter." Later that evening, she looked into her bathroom mirror, steam curling around her like breath, and wrote in lipstick, "I don't need to live big. I just need to live true." And she meant it. Camila, no longer commanding but curious, hosted a family dinner. She didn't make a schedule or assign chores. She simply asked, "How does everyone feel today?" Selena stared at her mother, not with suspicion, but with a soft kind of surprise. This was growth, not loud, but real. It reminded her, maybe hidden revenge isn't about shouting, "You hurt me." Maybe it's about choosing not to carry the wound forever. And maybe, just maybe, peace isn't a destination. Maybe it's a rhythm you build for yourself. Intimate, consistent, living to be loved. Selena said during grace, was exhausting. Living because I know I'm worthy. That's a quiet kind of joy. She looked around the table. At Talia humming a melody while serving salad. At Camila refilling water without correcting anyone. At herself, no longer a keeper of storms, but a keeper of stillness. and she wondered, not out of doubt but out of depth, how many years do we spend surviving before we give ourselves permission to live slowly, softly, in tune with our own breath? What if real love doesn't rush in like thunder, but arrives like a cup of warm tea left on your desk, without a word? What if love doesn't ask you to forget your scars, but simply offers its hand when you tremble? For some of us, love isn't rescue, it's recognition. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let someone hold what you never thought you'd share. His name was Ezra, a history teacher with soft eyes and a voice that never pressed for more than what was offered. After Selena's poetry workshops, he'd leave a mug of ginger tea on her desk, steam curling like an invitation she didn't know how to answer. He didn't ask about her family. He didn't ask about the cheating stories that stained the folds of her youth. But when she opened up, slow and raw like peeling bark, he listened like each word mattered. One afternoon, Ezra took her to a used bookstore tucked behind an old bakery. The kind of place where pages still smelled like dust and ink. He handed her a worn copy of Audre Lorde's collected poems. Inside a single sticky note, "For when your voice needs a sister." Selena flipped to Litany for Survival. By the third stanza she was crying quietly, tucked in the crook of his arm. Not because the words hurt, but because someone thought she deserved them. "Talia, ever the little sister?" asked later. "You're not afraid to love again." Selena's smile wasn't coy, it was whole. "I'm not loving to be filled," she said. "I'm loving to expand." One night, she dreamed she was on stage again, her poems woven into song. Behind the curtain, someone waited. Not to pull her off stage, but to walk home with her when the lights went dark. Camila, now softened by seasons, whispered, "Seeing you at peace says more than any explanation ever could." Ezra, in his calm way, asked if she'd write a small book with him, letters to the children who weren't held enough. She hesitated. Then she wrote the first chapter. "I once believed I was the leftover. But maybe I was always the beginning." They worked side by side, not in rush or pressure, but in presence. Selena learned that love could be gentle. That a true infidelity story doesn't always end in bitterness. Sometimes, it transforms into wisdom. She wrote in her journal that night, "Love is not a cure. It's the choice to walk beside someone who doesn't need saving." And maybe that's what betrayal stories forget to tell us. That there's life after heartbreak, that healing makes room for something sturdier. Ezra made tea every morning. Selena didn't need it, but she loved it. And sometimes that's enough. Somewhere between fear and forgiveness, we're asked to trust again. How do we know when the door is safe to walk through? What if fullness isn't loud or flashy, but quiet as a morning with birdsong instead of sirens? What if wholeness doesn't come all at once, but in layers? A note sung, a meal shared, a name signed with love. In a world obsessed with perfection, what if healing simply means showing up, as you are without apology, and finally whispering to yourself, "This life is mine." Selena moved into a modest apartment near Prospect Park. No honking taxis, just the rustle of trees and the occasional bark of a distant dog. Her mornings were now for walking slowly, breathing, listening to her own steps, writing without needing an audience. Talia had just released her debut album. Its title track, "The Sister Who Left Became the Light," climbed local charts. It wasn't about fame. It was about telling their story through beats and chords. At the launch party, Talia wore their grandmother's earrings and cried during the last verse. Selena stood in the back, hand over heart. Camila started yoga. Twice a week, she rolled her mat out beside women decades younger and didn't apologize when her knees cracked. She told Selena one day, while slicing mango, "I'm not living to be afraid anymore." They visited the old Bronx block. The cracked wall where Selena once scrawled her first poem had been transformed into a mural of Latinx poets. Selena among them, next to Julia de Burgos and Sandra Cisneros. The three of them took a photo beneath it, mother, daughters, and a piece of legacy in brick and paint. When Selena was invited to speak at TEDx, she didn't print her speech. She didn't memorize it. She walked on stage in a blue cotton dress, paused, and began, "Silence once saved me. But writing gave me back my voice." Ezra sat in the front row. He didn't wave. Just looked at her like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Afterward, a 10-year-old girl ran up, breathless. "I love writing too," she said, eyes wide. Selena bent down, signed her tiny notebook, and whispered, "You write, mi amor. Don't wait for permission." Back at home, Selena opened her laptop. She didn't plan. Didn't edit. Just typed, "I am not perfect. And I no longer have to hide." It wasn't a declaration. It was a homecoming. The journey from a true infidelity story to a full life is not a straight road. Sometimes it wins through betrayal, resentment, even stories of cheating wife stories that twist generations into silence. But Selena had learned, the pen in your hand is stronger than what they say behind your back. Now, she chose what to remember, what to release, what to plant again. And you? What's one part of your story you're finally ready to rewrite? Not to erase it, but to begin again with truth. What do you leave behind when the fire cools, the noise fades, and the ache of proving yourself finally hushes? Sometimes, legacy isn't about building monuments. It's about returning to the soil where you once broke, planting seeds where others only saw ruins. Selena never set out to be anyone's hero. She just refused to stay silent. And in that choice a different kind of human revenge began. Selena's final book of the year was Letters to My Silence. A soft, spoken riot stitched from poems never meant to be read aloud. It held pieces of the girl who once tiptoed around her family's expectations, each line a quiet release. For once, she didn't need applause. She just needed space to breathe. She chose 10 former students from her creative writing course, each holding untold family drama stories in their bellies. She offered them more than money. She offered belief. A scholarship, yes, but also a seat at a round table of survivors who had learned to write past the shame. Tell it raw, she told them. Tell it like no one's listening. But you are. One Saturday morning, she and Talia walked through the iron gates of their old high school. The halls still smelled of pencil shavings and cafeteria bleach. This time, they weren't running from shame, they were building altars from it. Their workshop, healing through word and rhythm. Students showed up with headphones tangled and notebooks torn. They left with lyrics. With lines that didn't rhyme but rang true. An older teacher pulled Selena aside afterward and said, "You and your sister, you didn't just heal. You turned the wound into curriculum." Selena laughed softly. "We just gave back what we never had." Later that week, she returned to the faded brick apartment where everything began. This time, she wasn't bracing for a blow. She came with 50 signed copies of her books, donated to the community library she once hid in on hard days. She didn't say much, just laid them down. The librarian hugged her as if placing weightless bricks back into the foundation. Camila walked beside her the whole way. At one point, she reached for Selena's hand, not in apology, not in pride, just in presence. They didn't speak, but the silence between them had softened. Sometimes, family revenge stories don't end in flame. They end with two women standing quietly on opposite sides of forgiveness, slowly stepping forward. That night, Selena sat cross-legged on her living room floor. The air smelled like lavender and second chances. She wrote a letter to her 16-year-old self. "You don't have to twist yourself into shapes to be loved," she penned. "You are not extra. You are not too much. You are the beginning of everything good that hasn't happened yet." When she recorded her final podcast episode of the year, her voice was steady. No need to perform, just clarity. "I used to believe I had to earn love. That if I spoke too loud, or not at all, I'd be left. But I know now. I don't need to be understood fully. I only need to be honest with myself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing looks like. Not perfection. Not applause. But not flinching when your own voice echoes back at you." Have you ever forgiven someone who never apologized? But you did it anyway, just to free yourself. She ended the episode with a final line. "You are not what happened to you. You are the way you chose to keep living, to keep loving, to keep writing anyway." What does it mean to come full circle? Not in triumph but in tenderness. When you no longer seek applause, but presence. Sometimes the real ending isn't fireworks or final words. It's a quiet moment by a lake, a hand held without agenda, a whisper back to your younger self saying, "You made it. And you never needed to be anything more than exactly who you are." The three of them, Talia, Camila, and Selena, spread out a blanket in the quiet green of Prospect Park. No phones, no photos. Just the weight of sun on their skin and the silence that once broke them now stitching them whole. They passed around fruit, not expectations. Laughed softly, not to cover tension but to enjoy breath. A gentle breeze carried their voices, softer, rounder, as if time itself had forgiven them a little. Each wrote a wish on a smooth river stone. They didn't share them aloud. That was the point. Selena's stone read, "To belong to myself and still be part of them." They tossed them into the lake, one after another, not for magic, just for release. Selena watched her mother smile, crease lines deep with history, but no longer sharp. She wrote later that night in her journal, "Peace isn't what you get when they say sorry. Peace is what you find when you stop needing the apology to live." Ezra didn't propose with a ring. He gave her a letter, handwritten, creased in the middle like he'd folded and unfolded it 100 times. If you want, we can write the rest of life together. Not to fix, but to feel. Selena laughed through her tears. I never needed a rescue, she said, but I finally believe I deserve a witness. Her new poetry collection launched that spring. The Grown Woman Who Learned to Cry Out Loud. The title alone stirred something in readers. In the closing poem, she whispered onstage, "Thank you to those who doubted, you taught me to bloom twice as loud, louder than revenge, softer than rage. A grown woman's echo never asks for permission." When the applause quieted, she looked up, not for praise but for connection. She ended with this. This isn't the end. This is the page I no longer write in blood. This is ink, and it's mine. Backstage, she didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She stood steady, mirror. No makeup. No mask. Just Selena Morales, hair tied loose, palms open. She whispered to her own reflection, "You made it back. Welcome home."